Previous. NX. From up here, you can see everything. But the miles and miles of green pines were hidden now, obscured behind a raging winter storm that blustered through the night and into the morning. There was no sunrise. The light of dawn was subtle and dim. We didn't even know what time it was. All of the clocks on the wall, on the computers, on Finn's watch were going backwards. 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, all the way until midnight, where they all stopped at the exact same time. Finn and Daniel sat at the desk, headsets on and monitoring the computers religiously. I stood by the security cameras, squinting my eye up at the screens to catch the slightest glimpse of activity behind the flurry of violent snowfall. Sometimes, when the wind subsided for only a moment, I could spot movement near the tree line and shifting in the ground. Judging by the distant rumble beneath us, the Hydra was nearby and patrolling the tunnels again. I crossed my arms, my breath forming a cold fog in front of my face. The missing shards from the window brought in gusts of wind that turned the radio station into a big walk-in freezer. All of us bundled up in our coats and hats to get through the night without collecting frost. Finn had been on the phone since the crack of dawn. "You won't answer yet?" I asked, pacing back and forth. "Oh." Finn took off his headset with a disgruntled frown, putting a hand to his forehead. All the village hall and the police station, and the phones just kept ringing. The floor beneath us shook, violent enough for something to crack. I winced, bracing myself against the wall as everything on the desk shifted a couple of inches to the left. It felt like we were beginning to tip. Why would they ignore us? I threw my hands up and let them slap down at my sides. I mean, you think we'd be in priority, and if something goes wrong up here, then it'll go wrong everywhere else too. Sure. Finn shrugged, sitting back in his chair with his foot tapping. Unless no one is there. I turned to the window, staring into the vortex of snow where I knew the town to be. In the distance, somewhere behind this blinding white mass, there was a little village that could very well be empty. Think we were the only ones left? I asked out loud to the room, not expecting an answer. If no one is there, why can't we leave too? Daniel asked, tightening the scarf around his neck. He passed an earnest glance between Finn and I, eyebrows raised and slightly hopeful. Because someone might still be out there, holed up and waiting out the storm. Finn stood up, staggering slightly when another gust of heavy wind caused the floor to rock like the deck of a ship. I scoffed. And there might be no one. Ran because the fog wouldn't stop at Pine Haven. Finn clarified, passing me a scolding glance. We don't know how far it can travel, the next town over, the entire state, the country. I chuckled nervously, leaning against the wall. Think Big Boy can swim? I asked. Unsurprisingly, no one laughed. The pipes in the back of the room started to clang and shiver, making the most ungodly noise. From out of the sink came a bubbling sound and then a messy spray of black liquid, splattering across the porcelain as steam rose into the cold air. I didn't think anything could be worse than the blood, but this place was just full of surprises. All the while, the radio was going haywire again, songs playing backwards or sometimes just skipping on the same spot over and over again. I know the chorus to Lonely Teardrops by good old Jackie Wilson would be stuck in my head until I died. Cabinets were slamming on their own. The light above us was swinging violently in a circle, and ghostly voices were whispering from the plumbing again. It was like a house of horrors, bombarding us with oddities from all sides. The stilts began to lean, the legs of the desk screeching as it moved a few inches across the floor. From outside, I could hear the sickening creak of bending metal from the radio tower next to us. Its red flashing light was still blinking through the snow flurries. Behind it, somewhere past the tree line and through the mist, I could see the vague outline of enormous twisted antlers peeking above the pines. Its footsteps sent a vibration through the ground, one mighty hoof at a time. The beast was pacing, like a hunter waiting for its prey to come out of hiding. The lights were flickering again. We all heard something from up above, a clatter against the metal roof. It shook dust from the ceiling, the particles picked up by the wind. It was followed by another, then another, as the storm outside began to spit balls of hail the size of grapes. It was never enough, was it? Vine was still fussing with his console, trying to connect to an emergency line. Finally, after over an hour of trying, he let out a little gasp and held on to the ears of his headset. Daniel and I both rushed to put ours on, listening in as the call connected to some distant number. "Hello?" Finn spoke loud and clear into his microphone. "This is Operator Za. Anna from the Pine Haven Emergency Broadcast Station. Location A is experiencing structural damage. I repeat, location A." There was a whine of static in our ears, bitter and sharp. Daniel quickly pulled off his headset, as if by instinct, while Finn tapped his finger against his microphone. "Can you hear me?" Through the white noise, a voice broke through. We both heard it, soft and quiet as if far away from the receiver. It was the sorrowful tone of a woman, weak but calm. "Hey Steven, it's Mom. I know you were busy, but I just wanted to call and tell you how much I love you. And in case I haven't told you enough, I am so proud of everything you've you." Finn's finger couldn't get to the button fast enough, hanging up the line and disconnecting us from the channel immediately. Without a single word, he pulled his headset away from his ears and put it down calmly, his face stern and emotionless as he left his seat to stand alone by the window. Daniel was about to get up, keen on marching over to the window to check on him. I grabbed him tightly by the arm and held him back, shaking my head. "So no one is coming?" he said quietly as he sat back down, eyes wide with a sense of dread that was all too familiar. As the building around us began to quake and shiver once more, we watched several shards of glass fall onto the floor at Finn's feet. "The fact of the matter is, there's no one out there coming to help. At the end of everything, it'll be just us three in this long stretch of forest, locked in a deadly staring match to see who flinches first." Our odds were looking pretty shitty. Em was the first to interrupt the miserable silence. "I have something to show you, while we've got time." "Is it important?" Daniel nodded his head with a sad smile. "Is. I wanted you to have your Christmas present a little early, just in case." As I leaned back in my chair impatiently, my shoulders slumped and I gave a grunt of dissatisfaction. "What, this really isn't the time for..." He was already reaching into his bag. "Oh, I mean it. I really want to make sure that you see it before, well, you know." He was pulling out something square and flat, bound in leather. He didn't get to wrap it. "It's not done yet, actually, but it might be the best we can do." He pushed a leather book into my lap. At first, I just stared at it, before my friend gave me an encouraging nod. I cracked open the first page to find a thick photo album, stuffed with all of the Polaroids Daniel had been taking since his last birthday. A photo of us at the desk, exhausted at 5 o'clock in the morning. Finn reluctantly posing in his brand new Ranger's uniform. A candid shot of me on the fire escape throwing stale cookies at Bartholomew. One of the pages in the middle was blank, but the caption was already written. "November. Evelyn moves into her new apartment." I remembered the photo still stuck to my fridge at home. I understood why he gave it to me now, why he said it was the best we could do. From the dreadful look in Dan's eyes to the unease in the air around us, it was possible, perhaps even likely, that there wouldn't be any more pictures. I was trying so hard not to get emotional. All those mundane little moments became a new story, mostly untold but brighter than the tale round it. A thought briefly drifted into my mind. When the three of us were gone and Operator was taking over, I hoped someone would find this. I hoped we would be remembered like this, not as panicked voices over the radio or bodies strung up in the trees, but as three people who found hope. I flipped to the end, where the empty pages flew by and a message was left on the back cover in Dan's messy cursive. Freckle face. I can't wait to spend another year being the biggest pain in your ass. Merry Christmas. Love, Danny boy. As I grinned at the last page, Daniel lifted his shoulders in a shrug and fidgeted nervously with his hands. Sorry, it's not super fancy or anything. I'm not really an artist or... Oh, shut up. I laughed, wiping my eye. It's perfect, thank you. I put the book down and pulled him in for a tight hug around the shoulders. As I squeezed the life out of him, I knew I was thanking him for more than just a photo album. The whistle of wind was louder now, breaking through cracks. The security camera closest to the tree line was beginning to flicker and lose its connection, and all three of us knew why. The ground was shifting, making an awful amount of noise as the nearest pines bent and groaned against the push of something enormous tangled in the roots. "Oh, we're losing camera," Finn said, balling up a fist in frustration when it finally went to static for good. Judging from the crash we heard, the shed had collapsed yet again, unable to stay standing when the frozen soil crumbled in. And I just fixed that damn thing too. The hail was still falling, tapping against the roof so loudly that I couldn't even hear myself think. Bloody, I'm not worried about the dish. I was already getting up to my feet, but I stumbled immediately and fell on my ass when the whole place started to tip again. The power flickered, the lights dimmed, and above us there was a terrible crack that made my spine tingle. Suddenly, the cold air was coming from above. A ball of hail the size of my fist had broken through the roof, falling through the supports and hitting the floor with a loud thud. All at once, the storm took a turn. Ice was bombarding the windows, shattering them to pieces until the lookout was an open door to the winter air. The wind that blew inside was enough to push us all back, tilting the entire room. Daniel and I rushed to the desk. Using every available body part, we had to keep the equipment from falling onto the hard floor and busting to pieces. It was a losing battle. Computer screens flickered, keyboards went flying and plugs were popping loose. Coffee cups shattered, their contents cold and untouched. The whole place was crumbling to pieces. The sky was falling. Ice shards big enough to bust through the roof were raining down, tearing into the desk and the floors and nearly killing us in the process. All it took was one single chunk of solid ice to bust the console and take everything down. And unfortunately for us, that's exactly what happened. Sparks were flying. Shards of ice tore into the computer monitors, turning the screens dark. The floor beneath us was starting to crack straight down the middle, the desk and all of its broken contents sinking into the center. Below, we could see the long and perilous drop, broken support beams splintered all the way down. Fuck this, it's time to go. I was shaking like a leaf as Daniel grabbed my arms, helping me jump from one side of the floor to the other. Fane was already raiding the cabinets, pulling out everything the three of us could carry: his pistol, a fireman's axe, first aid kit. He shoved the axe into his belt, and then threw the shotgun and ammunition my way. I caught it in trembling hands, strapping it around my back and filling my coat pockets as we raced for the door. The tower was already leaning in two directions, split in half and letting gravity take it. The forest was on our doorstep in mere moments. Thorny vines were crawling up the sides of the wrecked building like tentacles, slithering at furious speeds and bending the metal stairs. It was a hazardous and slippery path to the bottom, but nowhere near as terrible as the destination. Through the blinding fog and the flurry of snow, we could see the glow of his eyes, dozens of them, as bright and white as a beacon. The amalgamate roared, that blended voice of elk and bear and human creating a deafening sound that I could feel in my bones. He stood taller than the young trees, charging forward to crash his twisted antlers into the radio tower. He brought it down with one motion, the blinking lighted up it going up forever, and the metal bending and whining against the beast's weight. He trampled it with at least 20 different mismatched legs. We were It was all over. Our only hope was to get in the truck and drive, delaying the inevitable. But shit, man, for the first time ever, I didn't want it to die. I looked out into that foggy forest, barely visible through the storm, and I hated every thought of joining it. Fen took the lead, using a pistol to clear the way for us as we raced down the quickly collapsing stairs. Wet-looking beasts, fused between human and animal, crawled up the sides of the fire escape in droves to try taking us down with them. The ground beneath us was rumbling, but it wasn't the quakes. Mounds of frozen dirt shifted and bubbled under the surface, something huge pushing its way through the mines that stretched beneath us. The Hydra had been waiting. I was gripping Dan's arm, but he suddenly stopped. The vines had wrapped around one of his legs, gripping it in such a tight hold that I could hear his joints pop. "Fuck, hold still," I shouted, fumbling with the shotgun. Was it loaded? I didn't even know if it was loaded. Daniel was tugging at his leg, wincing in pain. I could see blood staining his pants as thorns began to dig in deeper. "Annie, can you just give me a second, hold still?" He gave me a look of pure, direct determination, but there was terror in his eyes too. And before I could do anything to help, he grabbed me and pushed me over the railing, throwing me off the side of the fire escape with one decisive motion. As I fell, making that sudden trip to the frozen ground, I could hear him shout the words "Tip sorry" over the noise. A scream caught in my throat just before I hit the ground. The snow softened my blow, creating an avalanche-shaped hole where I landed. And just in time. The amalgamate had finished taking down the metal tower and moved to the next, charging into our once secure refuge. Its limbs tangled in the wooden beams, crunching them beneath its weight like a pile of twigs. Electric cords snapped, sending sparks flying through the air as the tower finally collapsed with a loud and eerie groan, the impact shaking the mountainside. The amalgamate went with it, caved in beneath the wood and metal. Its antlers were tangled in the twisted remains. As the beast roared in frustration, I forced myself to my feet on itching legs that were still shivering from the fear of falling. The ground trembled. The voices of the dead surrounded us, staggering through the fog with their blinding white eyes glowing like so many fireflies in an open field. Many of them had been crushed by the falling tower, blood and dark stains splattered across the snow. Others were trying to pull themselves out of the twisted mess left behind. Humans, animals, combinations of the two, creatures, so rotten I didn't recognize them anymore. The forest had brought everyone up to play. Fane was already on his feet. I was the first to rush to the wreckage, ignoring the motion beneath the snow and the deafening roars of the amalgamate as I threw aside broken pieces of wood beams and twisted metal. "Annie!" I yelled for him, but I got no answer. My heart was racing so quickly that it hurt. "Anne, you fucking idiot, where are you? Answer me." "Found him," Fane called out, waving for me through the mist. I could just barely see his silhouette. I fought my way through the shifting snow, climbing over the remains of our tower to get to my friend. More than once, my shoe caught something soft and organic. I didn't want to stop and check what it was. Fane was already pulling Daniel out of the wreckage. But, even with the heavy fog in our faces, I could still see the blood, so much of it. His right pant leg had been torn through, shards of bone sticking out and steam rising from the warmth of his wound into the cold air. He was breathing heavily, the color drained from his face and his whole body shivering from pain and shock. "It's okay, buddy." I helped lift his head out of the debris, wiping blood from his cheek. "Oh, we were getting out of here. Fane, can you?" He didn't even wait for the question before he was lifting Daniel up, our injured friend crying out in pain as his broken leg twisted to the side, unsupported. We didn't have time to be gentle about it or to treat his wounds. "Len, get to the truck. I'll put him in the back." I stumbled back up to my feet, hearing the whine of metal behind us as the amalgamate tossed away pieces of the tower, fighting its way out. I felt pain in my ankles. Something was reaching up through the snow, breaking through the frozen dirt and grabbing at my legs with sharp claws. I stomped and kicked with all my might. At this point, I didn't want to know what the fuck was out there. I just started running towards the gravel road with both hands outstretched, hoping I felt the cold tar before anything else. When it was in my gas, I pulled it away with all of my strength, a flood of snow, hail, and broken twigs covering the ground. As Finn shoved Daniel into the bed of the pickup truck, I rounded to the other side, opening the old rusted door and fumbling with my keys frantically before the engine finally roared to life. It wasn't the only thing that rumbled. The ground began to split in front of the vehicle, the snow and dirt sinking into a fresh hole in the earth where so many decaying, gray hands started to claw their way out. We heard the terrible, mutated voices of the Hydra screaming and howling into the air as it started to climb to the surface with its many human heads in the lead. It was bigger now, the bodies at the top of the centipede fresher than the ones before it. More sleeping victims had floated towards their terrible end. "Then, get in the car," I said, refusing to take my eyes off the beast. "Get in the car." I practically threw myself fully into the driver's seat, glancing back just long enough to slam my foot on the accelerator. The wheels spun in the snow, moving mere inches. I heard the shrill squawk of crows as several of them began to throw themselves against the windshield, flapping their wings and scratching talons against the glass, some of them with many limbs or two heads shrieking in tandem. The front end of the truck started to tip as the Hydra pushed its weight against the ground, towering above us like a tree made of melted flesh. Arms, legs, hooves, tails, and all manner of other mismatched parts were grabbing at the front of the truck, trying to pull us down into the earth with it. I stomped on the accelerator harder, the wheels spinning and putting up smoke. "Then do me a favor, grab the wheel." In a show of utter stupidity that was very on brand for me, I took the shotgun off my back and leaned out the driver's side window, aiming at the Hydra's many human torsos. I shot one right under the ribs, the dead skin ripping apart, and half of its body hanging loose from the rest. I shot another, hitting its shoulder and blasting the arm right off. The tires squealed and the engine popped a few times before we finally started to move backwards, tearing through the snow and slipping in all directions. Fane was frantically trying to steer us while my foot remained on the pedal, shooting off another round at the monster that was now beginning its pursuit. Of Len, what in God's green earth is wrong with you? Fane pulled me by the coat and brought me back into the car. When I took control of the steering wheel, I did my best to avoid the trees, waving down the gravel path now covered in ice. I could hardly see the road in front of me. "I hope Dane's holding on tight," I said, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. I screamed as we spun out of control at the edge of the road, hitting a group of bushes. Finn looked more scared of my driving than anything else. Meanwhile, the many thundering steps of the Hydra closed in behind us as the awkward creature moved through the snow with any limb that would support its massive weight. If Dan was still alive, I did not envy his view. We sped down the mountain road, at the mercy of the ice and the blinding fog. I didn't know where we were going or if we'd make it there alive, we just couldn't say here. Eventually, I recognized the path we were taking. We were going towards the town. For the first time, I rubbed my two remaining brain cells together. I had an idea. It was just batshit stupid enough to possibly work. "Hey, Finn," I asked, wincing as I watched something dart across the road, clipping the front end of the truck. "I don't want to know. You know how the bell used to be a real thing?" "Yeah." "Does it still exist?" He went quiet for a moment, eyes wide and staring at the road in front of us. Shadows were lurking at the sides of the pavement. The ground was splitting open. Trees were falling and creating boundaries in our path that I wildly swerved to avoid. Everything was trying to stop us from leaving. "They put it on top of the church," Finn said decisively, a sudden expression of victory on his face. "Shit, this could actually fucking work." He slammed a hand against the dashboard a few times in a rare show of excitement. "If we get to the top, you and I can ring it. It will at least save us some time." And then, I looked at him for a split second, then faced the road again just as I had to swerve to avoid what looked like a headless deer running out in front of us. Finn didn't answer me. He just shook his head, his mouth closed tight. "This job takes all three of us," I said sternly. "But you told me that, remember? You said it takes all." "Evelyn, we can't." He gave me that look again. Direct, demanding, and tragically correct. "We don't have time." I hated when he was right. Instead of admitting it, I pushed my foot down harder on the gas, driving us forward as fast as I could. I didn't want to look behind us and see what followed, but I knew the amalgamate wouldn't be far behind. The Hydra could already be waiting for us for all we knew, the way the mines stretched in every direction beneath Pine Haven and beyond. The village limits were in our sights. I could see the downed power lines, the cracked brick, the busted vehicles left abandoned and broken. At first it looked like a ghost town, not a soul for miles except the frightened few who were hiding in their cold, dark cellars. But as I drove down those empty streets, I saw them, people floating in the air upside down, all of them hovering through the fog and towards the forest. Towards the light. It was calling them too. "Fucking hate this place," I said through gritted teeth as I turned the corner, the wheels sliding through the snow and slush. We were close now. I saw the distant shadow of our apartment building, now infested with dark figures that climbed up its sides like spiders. I saw the grocery store, its windows all shattered and beastly screams coming from within. Some of them were chasing us, people who had been infected with black sludge and beast-like limbs. I watched in the rearview mirror as Finn leaned out of his window and started to shoot his pistol indiscriminately, hitting a few of them and sending their body parts flying. Slamming on the brakes, I jolted to a halt outside of the church, the truck sliding in a half circle before the front bumper smacked into a telephone pole. I didn't give a shit. I left the vehicle running, throwing open my door and jumping out with both feet sliding on the ice. As Finn threw himself out of the passenger seat, I rounded to the back of the truck, climbing up onto the truck bed and taking the shotgun off my back. Daniel was still back there, thankfully, looking slightly nauseous and paler than ever but still breathing. I gave him a little tap to the face, trying to keep him awake as his eyes fluttered. "Annie, look at me." I got face to face with him, emptying the ammunition from my pockets. I was shaking from head to toe, dropping everything I touched. Here, take the gun. You need it more than me. Hold it tight and shoot at anything that comes for you, okay? He looked at me with that sickly, bloodied face, nodding his head sleepily. I could tell the blood loss was doing a number on him. He was holding one of his sides, and for the first time I noticed a piece of rusted metal pipe that was sticking out from under his rib cage, blood pouring from between his fingers. Shakily, he grabbed the shotgun and held it in one hand. "APK," he murmured with a delirious giggle. "If those are your last words, I'm going to bring you back and kill you." I told him, my jaw quivering. The tears on my face felt like they were turning to frost in the cold wind. Daniel grinned and stuck out his hand, extending his little pinky finger. "On B. Ecop. Pinky swear." I wrapped our fingers together, squeezing it tight. As the ground shook from the amalgamate's approaching steps, a sob left my throat and I wiped my face with my sleeve. The road was cracking. The tunnels beneath the town were collapsing from the weight of the Hydra as it tried to punch its way through the concrete. It was right below us. "Of you, Denny boy." He gave me a stupid, toothy grin, blood collecting in the corners of his mouth. "Of you too, freckle face." He ruffled the top of my head with a filthy hand. "Oh, go do your job. I'll see you soon, promise." I could hear the roar of the amalgamate growing closer. I couldn't tell if it was following us or if it was simply leaving destruction in its path without design, but its hooves made the earth tremble beneath our feet. I quickly jumped off the truck and rushed after Finn, following him up to the church steps where the doors were already busted open. Creatures from the forest were waiting for us. A twisted collection of human limbs was crawling across the walls like an insect, leaving burning black sludge in its wake as its tongue lolled out of its mouth. It looked our way and let out a shriek, which was quickly silenced by Finn's pistol before he moved on to the next. The thing still moved, writhing on the floor and attempting to drag itself with all its spiny limbs. I made a split-second decision and pulled the fireman's axe out of Finn's belt, lifting it over my head, and bringing it down on the sack of flesh with righteous fury. Felt fucking good too. I heard a blast from the shotgun outside and my stomach flipped. The Hydra was screaming, pulling itself out of the ground. While Finn was busying himself crushing some giant, screeching insect under his boot, I rushed to the back of the church and threw open every door I could find until I saw the old, rickety ladder that rose up to the ancient brass bell. "Finn, it's here!" I shouted over my shoulder, already beginning my climb. My hands were slippery, covered in Daniel's blood and dark gooey substances I didn't even want an explanation for. My shoes were soaked from the snow, making it hard not to slip and fall back down to the bottom. I heard Finn's pistol again, popping one after another, followed by the wet sound of something bursting. He wasn't following me. Windows shattered, beastly voices screeched, the walls of the building rattled. The church began to shake as something huge pounding on the walls, smashing into the old, paint-chipped wood. From the corner of my eye, I saw the glimpse of rotten hands reaching through the cracks. All I could do was climb, and hope to God those other two idiots could handle themselves. Something cold grabbed my leg. It was tutting me down, digging claws into my skin. I looked down for the briefest moment, spotting the gnarled face of a beast made of twigs and human flesh. It had followed me up and was wrapping thorny fingers around my ankle. I shrieked and kicked at it again and again until I heard its neck crack and its head twist to the side. That recovered face reminded me of an old friend I wished I could have kicked to death. I had my chance. I raced to the top of the tower, as quickly as I could, and pulled myself up into the cold air. The wind was howling, the earth was shaking. The source of those enormous steps was standing right before me, the amalgamate's many eyes all blinking at once through the fog. I saw the silhouette of its giant form, antlers made of twisting flesh and bone now covered in debris from the destruction it had brought to our sleepy mountain town. The enormous beast tilted its head back, a mouthful of mismatched teeth opening down the length of its neck. It made a horrendous sound, like the bellow of an old foghorn. The smell of death and wet leaves carried on its cold breath. My hand reached for the rope above me. As the amalgamate leaned closer, its jaws dripping with black sludge, I pulled with all of my weight, and the bell let out a tremendous sound that made my ears sting and my teeth chatter. The wind changed directions. The fog seemed to part around me, as if pushed back by a powerful force. I rang the bell again and again, even when my arms began to burn and my hands were growing chapped and red. The amalgamate stumbled back slightly with each sound that reached its ears, reluctant to leave, but pushed away by an invisible force field that grew stronger with each shrill sound. "That's right," I screamed, laughing through the panic and the fear. "Oh, Anjit, this is my house, you hear me? You big bitch." I pulled the rope in quick succession, fueled by adrenaline and pure feral joy. I didn't stop until I was too exhausted to continue, finally collapsing to my knees. The world went eerily quiet after a while. The ground no longer rumbled. The amalgamate steps faded into the distance. And for the first time in hours, I could see more than an inch in front of my face again. The fog was creeping back into the forest bit by bit, the many denizens of its accursed grounds going with it. I didn't recognize Pine Haven anymore. It was in ruins now, torn to pieces with old familiar buildings turned to rubble. My old elementary school was just a pile of bricks. The convenience store didn't have a roof. And out in the streets, some very confused and sore people were finding themselves waking up from dreams of floating towards a bright magenta light. Some were screaming or crying. Others were just in shock. They might never remember what happened here today. I sat up there alone, catching my breath and looking over the entire town. I could see everything from up here. "Hey, Quasimodo!" Finn's voice yelled up from the front steps of the church. I looked down at him. He was covered in blood that probably wasn't his own. He grinned up at me, sporting the biggest smile I had ever seen him wear, and gave me 2 thumbs up. I slid back down the ladder and rushed out the door into the war-torn streets of our quiet little village. For the first time ever, Finn actually reached for me and pulled me into a hug, lifting me about a foot off the ground in the process. Worked. I was smiling while tears flooded my face. I squealed excitedly and kicked my legs. Actually fucking worked. Oh, we did it. We did it. The truck was dented on all sides. We were covered in blood and guts. Our radio tower was just on, but the storm had passed. We were safe for another day, maybe another hour. As soon as Finn put me back on solid ground, I ran to the road and caught sight of Daniel sitting in the truck bed, still bleeding and still holding his injured side but very much alive. He gave me a huge smile, teeth stained red. "You know," he started, voice dry and weak. He held up the shotgun. "I'm actually kinda good with this thing. A regular Wild West bandito." Several of the Hydra's heads and torsos were scattered in the road ahead of us, dead and in pieces. Some of those pieces were still wiggling a little bit, but it was nothing the wheels of my old ride couldn't handle. I hopped up into the back of the truck, the knees of my jeans stained red. "Not bad at all, cowboy. Not bad," I said proudly, giving my stupid friend a cold and bloody kiss to the side of his head. He laughed, dropping the shotgun down to his side and leaning against the back window. With a deep breath, He looked down at his broken leg and the pool of blood slowly growing around him. He coughed, red flecks on his lips. I think a hospital sounds be pretty good right about now. Everything's getting a little dark. I grimaced a bit. "Here, buddy, you look like shit. Just stay awake, och." Finn was already getting back in the vehicle. I jumped over the side and stopped him before he could close the passenger's door, gesturing with a nod towards the seat beside him. "Oh, ahead, take him into town for me," I said. "I'll stay here. Just get him there quick." "You sure?" Finn was getting out of his seat. Then, from up above, we both heard the distant sound of a helicopter's blades. Someone was coming our way. "Yeah." I nodded with a content smile, still looking up at the sky. After all, someone's gotta ring the bell. Finn let out a heavy breath and patted me proudly on the shoulder. "Then I'll leave this place in your capable hands, number it." It was afternoon. The sky finally cleared for the first time in days. A red sunset on its way. As Finn and Daniel sped off down the mountain path towards the nearest town, reinforcements were flying in fashionably late. Said years that it would take a full-scale monster invasion over the mountainside for them to remember we were even here. Maybe one day they will tell me more about this place, about whether or not Station is the only one of its kind, about how we got where we are today. But for now our job is pretty simple: rebuild and resume. The next day, Finn came back alone, filling me in on all the gory details. Apparently Daniel is the luckiest son of a bitch to ever walk this godforsaken earth, because the metal rod that stabbed him was centimeters away from his spleen. I called him on the second day of his hospital stay, at which time he excitedly told me that at one point his heart actually stopped on the table, and he also had a broken tailbone. "Really busted my ass out there, Lion," he said the second he picked up the phone. "Edit my ass." "Yeah, buddy, I get it." On the third day, we were all together again, trudging through the snow towards the remains of our old watch tower. The debris was being moved away and all the parts were laid out for a brand new metal tower to go up. For now, a team of rangers from the other side of the mountain were putting together a little tin shack for us to use as a temporary broadcast station until they could get us back in the air and on the air. Finn said there's rumors of an election coming soon. Most of the township council, including the police chief, have vanished or actively abandoned their homes. I told him that he should run, to which he made some uncomfortably realistic vomiting sound as a response. We stood in the snow, Daniel in crutches and all of us freezing our asses off. In the distance, we could hear the bell ringing. It was always ringing nowadays. "Looks like we won't be decorating the tower for Christmas this year," Finn said. "Sorry, Danny." Daniel gave a disappointed pout, huffing through his nose like a kid who didn't get his way. Poor fella. He had the tinsel picked out and everything. As I glanced over the wreckage, the corner of something square and smooth caught my eye. Kicking a few pieces of broken wood out of the way, I dug through the snow and splinters until my hands wrapped around the edges of the photo album Daniel had given me. It was a little roughed up on the outside, but all of the pages were kept safe and clean. Looks like those empty pages might be filled after all. "We can decorate our little shanty when we get back," I said, tucking the book under my arm. "Let's get out of here. I'm sick of looking at this place." As the three of us walked back down the gravel path, I caught sight of familiar wings fluttering on a nearby branch. Bartholomew survived the storm. "You know," Daniel said, trying not to get his crutches stuck in the snow. "Again. You guys are welcome to my family Christmas if you want to come, if you don't have other plans, obviously." I gave him a grateful smile. thinking it over for a brief moment before another thought came to mind. Actually, I was thinking of visiting my mom. I promise you'll get me for Christmas Eve and New Year's. Oh, deal. And Neil seemed more than happy with that plan. I gave one more brief glance to the tree line, spotting a bit of movement behind the winterberry bushes. In the shadow of the pines, I could have sworn I saw the shape of a mountain lion calmly easing back into the forest one slow step at a time. The wind blew cold against the back of my head, tangling into my hair. I haven't been thinking about him as often as I used to. As we got back in the truck, ready to drive through our sparsely populated town, my eye caught the pulsating glow of that magenta light in the center of the forest, a reminder that our problems weren't over yet. They were only getting stronger, but I guess we were too. I'll think about that another day. For now, I think all three of us were due for a little break from this place. This paid vacation wasn't going to take itself. So where are we going, boys? I asked, clapping my hands together behind the steering wheel as the engine rumbled to a start. Finn was helping Dan get his scrawny ass into the back seat, careful of his bandages and cast. I dunno, Finn stared out the window wistfully. Where have you always wanted to go? I thought about it for a good long moment. Given all the freedom in the world, where did I want to go? I suppose, anywhere and everywhere, as long as I was with these two. You know what? I started down the winding mountain road, the radio off and the gas tank full. You think we'll know it when we get there? This is Evelyn McKinnon at you. And I don't think our story is over yet after all. The end of the world has to start somewhere.